It seems there are two orological heavy hitters that are getting pitted up against each other more and more lately, and for some pretty interesting reasons. Now I'm talking about none other than Grand Seiko and Rolex. Which of these will last longer? It is 1:55 p.m. Let's get down to business. Now, when it comes to these two watchmakers, enthusiasts really love to compare them, and it's not because they're at all similar, it's actually because they're very, very different. Now, whether you like it or not, Rolex is a tool watchmaker, and they produce tons of units per year, like tons. I know, it's kind of hard to believe because if you go to any Rolex AD nowadays, you won't find any that you want anyway. And another harsh truth is that although Rolex watches are very robust and fancy schmancy, they have a hefty price tag, the truth is, they don't have very many man-hours invested into each product. Now, Grand Seiko, on the other hand, is predominantly a dress watchmaker. You know, Rolex, they do have some dress watches within the Cellini line, but predominantly they make tool watches. Grand Seiko, they have definitely some tool watches, more like sporty watches, but predominantly they're known for their dress watches. It is true, Grand Seiko also produces a good amount of units each year, but each one of Grand Seiko's products has a hefty amount of man-hours invested into them. In fact, the percentage of man-hours that Grand Seiko invests into each unit of theirs, Rolex will probably never ever achieve. You see, Rolex has a product line that, aside from a few subtle size changes, it really hasn't deviated that much from the original blueprint for like decades, and it's felt like centuries, right? Rolex has made the same watches for centuries. Now, Grand Seiko, on the other hand, they've been around for a while, not as long as Rolex, but you know, they're a very innovative watchmaker. They make new things every year. They're always switching things up. Grand Seiko likes to experiment with materials, with colors, with complications. Rolex has ADs strewn across the globe in pretty much every major city you'll find yourself in, and Grand Seiko, on the other hand, just started opening official boutiques, I think like 3 or 4 years ago in the US. So there's no bones about it, right? Grand Seiko and Rolex are very different in size when it comes to brand equity, but business jargon aside, whose products will last longer? That's the question that I got last Saturday live stream, and it was so interesting, and we had this really interesting kind of back and forth in the comment section that I decided to film just an episode here for you guys. So whose products will last longer? Whose products are more robust over a period of time? Grand Seiko or Rolex? Now, here's the truth when it comes to this question. When it comes to reliability of a product, specifically wristwatches, the main variable is the wearer. So we're gonna try to kind of like explain this visually, all right? So let's take a look at the highest pinnacle of watchmaking, just the unobtainium. We're talking about like chain-driven movements and complications you'll just never ever see, gyro tourbillons, and things that need to be set by authorized dealers. Like you have to bring in your altiplano to go ahead and get wound and set for you, and like the thinnest watch ever, and just all these things that are so meticulous. Oh, it took forever just to put this one gear in place. The highest end you could ever think of. And then by contrast, the lowest, just bottom shelf piece of rubbish underneath the wastebasket, like brushed under the rug, just the utter piece of crap! Well, that's gonna upset some people. Excluding these just two crazy extremes, there's this huge middle section, okay? This incredibly vast, broad middle section that encompasses a ton of watchmakers and a ton of watches. And when we take a look at this middle section, it's just so incredibly competitive within this huge, broad field that for the most part, all the products within this section are just pretty comparable when it comes to reliability. And I know that's kind of just not a very exciting answer, but let me elaborate. Now guys, let's face it, Grand Seiko and Rolex, I mean, they're very fancy schmancy, impressive watches. They both carry some hefty price tags, especially when we're looking at their precious metal offerings, but for the most part, these two watchmakers are well within that middle section, right? They're not the highest end of watchmaker. I mean, the number one complaint that we get from Rolex, or from enthusiasts talking about Rolex, is that number one, you can't find any of their watches. Number two, they've made the same watches forever. And number three, none of their watches really have any interesting complications. Okay, Cellini doesn't count. That's just dissolve the Cellini line, all right? Stop trying to make it a thing. And Grand Seiko, while they're super duper innovative and they have things like the spring drive and crazy finishing and just beautiful dials, they don't have the brand equity to get there. You're not there yet. So Grand Seiko, Rolex, both within the middle section. So what are the variables within these two watchmakers' products? Well, we mentioned it before, man hours, right? Grand Seiko, their products spend a whole lot more time in a watchmaker's hands. Someone is literally in Japan finishing their products with their hands. That Zaratsu finishing so dang sharp you could cut an onion with it. You know, ogres are like onions. Ogres are like parfait. Somebody once told me the word. I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy because of this episode. But all jokes aside, Grand Seiko... I've only seen Shrek 1, I just realized. I've only seen the first Shrek. I don't know why I just felt the need to like derail the episode by saying that, but yeah, I've only seen one Shrek. How many Shreks have they made? Leave it in the comment section. But guys, all jokes aside, Grand Seiko watches are hand finished, much more impressive, a ton of man hours, even in the kind of more affordable lower tier of Grand Seiko offerings, they still have a ton more man hours than anything Rolex produces. And Rolex are essentially made by robots nowadays. The robots. The machines are taking over, okay? They've already taken over the Rolexes. Now what's next? The trucking industry? Oh, automation? Great. We had to worry about the virus, and now we gotta worry about robots? I am anti-robot. iRobot. I am a computer. But because Rolex products are essentially made by robots, I almost said made by computers. The dang wristwatches are made by computers. Because Rolex products are pretty much assembled by robots at this point, there's a lot less variability within each product they make. And when you factor in that like Rolex has essentially been making these watches for like a century at this point with very little deviation, with very little complication. I mean, the most complicated watch Rolex makes right now is the Sky Dweller, I believe. You've got to assume there's just less deviation altogether within a Rolex product. I mean, Grand Seiko, a dude in Japan is putting these things together, hand finishing them. Although it's incredibly clean and impressive, there's going to be more deviation and variables within each product they produce than with any Rolex because there's no soul in the Rolex. It's made by computers. So because of this alone, and this is where it's gonna get, I can already hear you typing. There's more evidence to state that your average Rolex will probably be more robust over a longer period of time than your average Grand Seiko. There, I said it. And for those of you who didn't just angrily shut off your device, and whoever's still here watching this, the one thing I'd like to finish on is that Grand Seiko still makes better watches than Rolex. So, take that as you will. All right, guys, hope this episode didn't upset you too much. Hope you had some fun, and if you did, leave a thumbs up. If you didn't like it and you just don't like my beard, then leave a thumbs down. That's fine. Any interaction really does help the channel out a bunch, but the easiest way to help the channel out is just to, subscribe and keep watching the content. Just do what you're doing, and I will see you on the next one. All right, guys, stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed. Check out all the links in the description below. And again, hit that bell icon if you haven't already so I can, know that you know when I know I'm uploading. Did that make sense? Hope so. I will catch you on the next one. I'm Jory Goodman, the Time Teller, and always remember, I didn't invent time. I just tell it.